Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is the 666th day since October 7th of 2023. Today is August 2nd of 2025. These are daily updates that we've been doing every single day for 666 days to give witness to the atrocities, to give witness to all of the lives lost, the more than 60,000, that's the official number, of Palestinians killed in Gaza over the past 20 plus months. Starting with an update on Gaza from the last 24 hours, apparently the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, and the special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, only visited the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation camps in the far of South Gaza, meaning that they didn't see the devastation and the atrocities, that they only saw what was controlled, as of course they were accompanied by the Israeli military. They only saw a very, very small piece of what's happening in the Gaza Strip. So news reported that Witkoff and Huckabee toured Gaza. That's what the news reported, that they assessed the humanitarian situation in order to help President Trump craft an aid plan. He praised today, Ambassador Huckabee praised the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Despite the growing death toll near its hubs, Trump promised he's going to deliver a new plan to deliver aid. But there were several articles about this. The Washington Post published articles saying that Trump keeps talking about giving $60 million to the Gaza aid through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, but authorization was actually only for about half of that. And so far, only about $3 million has been dispersed. Then there were aerial pictures of the Gaza destruction that were provided by the Jordanians as the Air Force dropped aid from the sky and took pictures of the devastation. Trump's policies are still trying to divert U.S. public attention from the Epstein situation and now the bad employment numbers. And also there's a combination of tariffs, actions, and what's happening in Gaza. You heard that President Trump threatened Canada based on their decision to recognize the Palestinian state, or if they decide to. Huckabee has participated, but he and the administration are themselves diverted from their own diversion to first attack Macron for his declaration saying that he accepts a state of Palestine, and then a slew of U.S. allies who have pledged to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September if Israel's actions via Gaza do not change. I mentioned Trump called out Canada on its Palestine pledge, saying that that would affect tariff negotiations between Canada and the United States. And then he raised the tariff on Canada to 35% starting this week. So it's hard to understand how news can be released that's talking about the increase of aid when that is just not the reality. One piece of news reported that there were 90 aid packages of food for residents of the South and North Gaza Strip that they were airdropped within recent hours as a part of the cooperation between Israel, the UAE, Jordan, Egypt, France, and Germany. 90 aid packages. I mean, even if they're huge packages, the population's more than 2 million people. What kind of aid distribution are we talking about that's going to be effective when there's already an effective mechanism in place that was distributed by UNRWA and by international aid agencies, where the food is available? There's a mechanism that follows Israeli security protocols and yet will not be employed. Hamas has denied that it's willing to disarm, saying that resistance is its national and legal right as long as the occupation of the Palestinian people continues, and that it will continue to resist until the establishment of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. Some differentiate East Jerusalem as opposed to all of Jerusalem, but the declaration is Jerusalem as its capital. The IDF reported that it killed on July 24th the deputy commander of Hamas's Al-Furqan battalion. This is Salah al-Din Za'atra, who was responsible for directing and advancing numerous, this is according to the IDF, terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians and Israeli troops in the Gaza Strip. The health ministry in Gaza today announced that in the last 24 hours, 83 people were killed. An additional 1,079 people have been wounded in Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This includes 39 people who were killed and 849 who were wounded as they were waiting for the distribution of humanitarian aid. Might Ambassador Huckabee see that reality and not ignore it? There was a video that was released of one of the Israeli hostages in the past day or so where he looks completely emaciated. It was posted as he was digging inside of a tunnel. The caption it was said that he was digging his own grave, and thus there was an uproar in Israel and in other parts of the world. So Hamas published this video. It's an additional video of the Israeli hostage Eviatar David. A statement from David's family said, Hamas is using our son as a live experiment in a vile hunger campaign. He's being starved purely to serve Hamas's propaganda. Now, what concerns me about that is that Palestinians are starving alongside of Eviatar David, and it is the policies of the Israeli government that starve them. But Herzog, the president of Israel, said that the faces of hostages, Eviatar David and Ram Brzezlowski, say it all. Silence is not an option. Herzog shared images of the hostages who were featured in these videos that I just mentioned, published by Hamas and also the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This was in recent days on X. Their faces say it all, he wrote, forced to dig their own graves, tormented with execution, starved, tortured, and wasting away in Hamas's terror tunnels. Hamas doesn't just starve hostages, it starves the people of Gaza, Herzog said, saying that Hamas rejoices as it succeeds in distracting the world from its own crimes against humanity. I urge world leaders to demand the hostages' release, to ensure aid reaches civilians, not terrorists. This is a test of humanity. Silence is not an option. May I just say, I concur. Hamas should be held accountable for the atrocities of their crimes. The hostages should be set free. That they're being held in Gaza is an atrocity and is unacceptable. And the deliberate starvation of an entire people group, which is being perpetuated by the Israeli state, is unacceptable. And so using the hostages as I think the aim in war, what is that expression? The first thing that goes in war is truth. That's not how it goes, but you know the expression I'm talking about, that's the case where the people who are suffering the most are being used as tools of propaganda, not only for Hamas, but also for Israel. The Israeli foreign minister called on world counterparts to publicly express their moral stance on the suffering and release of the hostages. Foreign Minister Saar also issued a statement today about this, saying that he was initiating a meeting of the UN Security Council on the subject of the hostages. The world cannot remain silent in the face of the difficult images that are a result of the deliberate sadistic abuse of hostages, which also includes starvation by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. I just want to remind those who are listening that just in the past week, a report from the Israeli military and also a report from USAID said that Hamas has not been systematically redistributing aid. When aid comes in, it is not being redirected and systematically, redirected by Hamas. There were also families of hundreds of protesters, families of hostages and hundreds of protesters convened in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, calling for the release of those held in Gaza, specifically in response to the recent documentation of Eviatar David and Rom Brzezlowski. In the U.S., President Donald Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, we talk about him a lot. He not only visited parts of Gaza, but he also visited the Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, meeting with families of hostages and taking part in a protest calling for the immediate release of those held in Gaza. Family members who met with him said that he assured them that the U.S. plans to push for a deal to release all of the hostages at once, with Hamas agreeing to disarm and Prime Minister Netanyahu committed to ending the war in Gaza. It's important to note that in the U.S., there was just a Gallup poll released that found 32% of U.S. adults only support Israel's military actions in Gaza. This is a record low number since things began in October of 2023. The poll also found the strongest partisan split yet. Support among those who identify them as Republicans still remains strong at 71%, but just 8% of Democrats and 25% of independents say that they support and back Israel's military actions. I wanted to talk for a minute today about the occupied West Bank. A resident of the Palestinian city of Tulkarem who was holding a knife arrived at the kibbutz Metzer near the West Bank and was arrested by the security guard of the kibbutz, according to police. And today there was another round of grotesque attacks by extremist Israeli settlers. One Palestinian man was shot dead in the West Bank. He was shot by settlers. The man, Mo'in Asfar, was killed during attacks by settlers in the village of Akraba and Jorish. which is located in Area B of the West Bank. Community leaders from the village of Taibeh, that's the only completely Christian village that's outside of Ramallah, sent us pictures and videos also saying that they arrived. I mean, this is the third attack on Taibeh, saying they arrived at the same place where the cars were burned last Monday. And they said that there were all eyes upon them, meaning that they were being surveilled, and that they would like to challenge visitors and ambassadors and representatives to respond to the attacks on them and their community. I wanted to take a minute to summarize what's been happening in Taipei over recent weeks, as there's been marked escalation of extremist settler attacks, including the lethal assaults in Sinjil, in Ain Malik, and the surrounding areas that have displaced Palestinian families. Against this turbulent backdrop, the Christian village of Taipei, renowned for preserving centuries of Christian presence, endured a series of incidents which demanded international attention and prompted the visit of church leaders. The patriarchs and heads of churches had a solidarity visit with diplomatic representatives. The U.S. did not go on that trip, but a few days later, the U.S. ambassador Huckabee did visit the village. That visit brought swift diplomatic and political attention. It generated pressure that shortly led to a coordinated media pushback that many of the facts had been distorted. It's been verified that between July 7th and 11th, events in Taipei included settlers entering the villages in a series of increasingly aggressive incursions. They brought livestock into the village, with cows reaching private homes and the perimeter of the Church of St. George, an act perceived locally as a calculated desecration. Settlers roamed through the town, some armed, some mounted on horseback, creating an atmosphere of fear and tension among the civilians. On July 11th, there was a fire that erupted in fields adjacent to the church. Visible scorch marks appeared on the outer wall of the historic structure. While no individuals were directly observed igniting the fire, it occurred at the immediate intersection at the context of settler presence, and is consistent with a broader regional pattern of deliberate arson against Palestinian property. Residents and clergy were subjected to verbal threats, intimidation, and physical damage to their environment. These events were documented in real time by local residents and personnel of the church, and they were reported immediately afterwards by the local priests to the of the church in Jerusalem. In response, the churches, the patriarchs and heads of churches responded with public statements based solely on verified facts. They did not embellish or speculate, and there have been efforts to de-escalate tensions carried out discreetly and in coordination with local partners. The churches provided pastoral presence and support to the families that were affected. There was also a statement issued by the Israeli police suggesting that the fire occurred in open grazing areas that caused no damage to the church, but that's inconsistent with visual evidence and on-site documentation available to both the church and international observers. The fire did reach the ancient stone walls of the church, leaving a clearly visible scorch mark. Moreover, the police statement addresses only the matter of the fire, while entirely and deliberately ignoring the broader sequence of events that surrounded it, where each constitutes in its own right a criminal offense under applicable law, including trespass, threats, public nuisance, and property damage. Framing this as only one part instead of the whole picture fails to meet the expected standard of a thorough and impartial public investigation. In addition, there's been a media campaign brought forward by the settlers in the immediate aftermath of the diplomatic visits. Settler-aligned commentators and outlets launched a coordinated public campaign to deny that damage occurred, to assert that settlers came to assist and not to intimidate, that the campaign was misrepresenting the conduct of local clergy and residents. This campaign appears to be a calculated response to the pressure generated by the international presence and scrutiny, especially following the visit of Ambassador Huckabee to the place. A conclusive indication of the continued nature and intent of these actions is the fact that settler violence has not abated. In the nights between the 26th and 27th of July, 2 vehicles were set on fire. Hate graffiti was spread in Taipei. This marks a dangerous escalation. And there have been actions that just happened in the last 12 hours. I was texting with people who are representatives of the U.S. government just this afternoon, on Saturday afternoon, which is late night Jerusalem time, and they said that the attacks were happening even right then as we were in communication. So there are continued threats that are happening against Taipei. in addition to the lethal assaults in Sinjil and Malik and the surrounding areas. I wanted to be sure to let you know that because it's critical that we respond, that we speak out, and that we speak accurately without exaggeration on behalf of not only Christian communities, but all who are suffering in Palestine, in Israel, and in the entire area. May God go before us in our efforts to seek to end the violence in the Gaza Strip, and may peace come quickly. In the name of Christ, amen.